discussion about the show and all the nuances that are going to go into what we're talking about today. So I wanted to just kind of give everybody an understanding of what we're doing and how and what direction we certainly need to go in. And one of those directions is obviously talking about the NFL, talking about concussions, and talking about what it means to you as an individual, your children, and, of course, the investigative aspects into a progressive ongoing issue, which many, and I'm just not picking on football, I'm talking about various sports, even gentlemen and women who come back from serving our country also face in a progressive manner. And we're talking not only about the CTE, but we're also talking about football. And I think both of these deserve equal amount of attention, but more so specifically to the aspect of the game where consistent hits will cause and force, and it's already been proven. This isn't something I just made up out of my one-bedroom apartment. It's taken many medical associations to talk about it, to really dive into what's going on, how can it be found out. And, of course, the more so, the one that I'm talking about explicitly is obviously football. Why? Because it's one of the most popular sports as young college students and young college athletes will play. And even those that have played sports recognize that the money that they can acquire by playing in the NFL can certainly be one reason to play the game, while others just because they love the game. And they feel a sense of acceleration when they play the game from an adrenaline standpoint, from a personal standpoint, and of course the stakes are far greater than to just simply state that I love playing the game. Welcome back a guest to the show, somebody who has not only the means to voice his thoughts, but someone who has feelings about the game that I'm more than confident to suggest that he wishes that those feelings that he had and currently has doesn't ultimately kill the sport in of itself, but has caused injuries and can't simply be cured by pills or surgery or even an NFL spotter on the sideline. And to mention the financial hardship that he and hundreds of other former NFL players are contending with daily. And look, I'll be honest with you, some are delivering pizza. Yes, I said delivering pizza. We're talking guys who have served themselves well in the NFL, now find themselves struggling to get by from a state of where their life is right now, struggling physically and mentally, and ultimately who have died from playing the game, by which hasn't been given back to them when they or their family has needed it. Look, let me just set the record here, and I'm going to set it straight. This show isn't simply just crying for help. It's about making what has been going wrong for so long and making it right, and the logistics that can be corrected to make it right. Welcome back, Chukky, Okobi, to the show. Thank you for coming back on the show, Chukky.
No problem. No problem at all. Anytime.
Look, we've seen this game evolve in a variety of ways, and one would suspect that when changes are made, it goes beyond just making helmets better. But in all fairness, making them better can't hurt. Or perhaps the techniques that coaches train their players to not only lead with their head, but of course you've heard the obligatory use your head. Well, some of them take that very seriously, and coaches have given that to them. It's the way the
game's played. That's the way the game's played. It's played with the head. As a matter of fact, maybe I'm being a little ambitious with my hopes for the game of football, but the only thing that they can really do is make the helmet in a way that it can protect the brain. Because right now, I don't know exactly what a scientist would do to keep a brain in place. And we get into the specifics about how playing football does hurt people. I don't know exactly how they would do it, but I'm not a scientist. And so I believe because we are able to create things as complex as the Hubble telescope, I'm talking about human beings, that I believe that scientifically they could find a way that we can play this game. When you talk about changing, we've already changed rules. Every week we have arguments about what's a catch and what's not. We're changing the rules as far as kickoffs go. We're changing the rules as far as blindside blocks goes. And eventually, it's going to cease to be football. And so the answer's got to lie in the hands of science. And as far as what the NFL's impact is as far as this game goes, and how it's affecting all of us here in America, and specifically those of us that put our body lives on the line to play this game for everyone's entertainment. You know, that's where I think a lot of the issues are, is in the fact that the NFL won't take responsibility for those of us that have been injured playing football, even though they knew that playing football does indeed lead to problems later in life. And they did not tell us. They kind of kept it a secret and let us continue to keep playing the game without giving us the opportunity to make the choice for ourselves as to whether this was something that, a risk that we as individuals and collectively were willing to take. And so I think that with the issues we have, I think the NFL is doing a lot to cover their own tracks and to make the public as a whole believe that football is okay to play. Whereas the way it is right now, it isn't okay to play.
I don't think it's been okay to play for quite some time. Looking at the archaic beginnings of what a leather helmet looked like, which was just that, a leather helmet. There was no padding, there were no guards, there were no face masks, there were no safety features whatsoever. And I don't think they believed that those hits would lead to guys who exited the NFL once an actual helmet was created to believe that it took them that long and without the forethought to make something like that ultimately affect their lives and put them in such an obligatory state of disarray that they don't know what day of the week it is, if they're even still around at this point. However, when you talk about the Hubble telescope, and this is something we've been kind of making a reference point to, and I think it should be known that, again, this is not about trying to put our hands out and say, more Polwich, please. This isn't about that. This is about the understanding from a football player's perspective. And, of course, when we look at other players in the NFL, and more so specific, I don't know if anybody knows who this is, but Jeff Winans, drafted by the Buffalo Bills in 1973, and somebody who played many, many years before that just to get a shot to get into the NFL. He played for the Oakland Raiders in 76. He played for the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But somebody more closely related to this, and I mean that in the most figurative of ways, is his wife, Brandi Winans, who joins us here this afternoon. Welcome to the show, Brandi. How are you?
Did we lose her?
I think we did.
Thank you so much, guys, and thank you for having me on today. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Well, I appreciate you taking your time out, Brandi, because you have been probably the biggest advocate and that I've heard of in regards to wives who have played in the NFL, wives whose husbands had played in the NFL, and rather more so trying to be the advocate of getting the information out there, from letting people know what the situation is that not only you had faced, but what you had dealt with when your husband, of course, God rest his soul, and he had passed on due to complications from CTE. But what was it about the educational aspect, having to understand what it was about while your husband was with us?
Originally, I didn't understand when he left football from physical injuries at 9 years old. And I was thrown into the role of sole support and fighting and working outside the home while he was fighting depression and physical injuries. So originally, and we had no one back in those days. He left in '81 to help us. We had no support group. The NFL pretty much, see ya, thanks. Don't call us. We'll call you sometime, but not even any of those calls. So I had no idea what to do and how to face something like that. And it was a learning experience because I love my husband and I wanted to do anything that I could to help him. And over the years, his physical injuries as his emotional and neurocognitive behavior patterns, especially the last 10 years that we were together, to a point where we actually separated and divorced and watching an NFL HBO Real Sports special one night in 2007 in May with a young man named Chris Nowinski, who was talking about a book he wrote called Head Games and giving all the symptoms and signs of concussions. And I got this god-awful knot in my stomach because every one of them was Jeff. And I got him on the phone, and I said, how many concussions did you have? And he said, well, I didn't have that many concussions, but I had my bell rung a lot. And I found this young man, and we started conversing, and he said, you know, you got to come up to the congressional hearings. You need to testify. I'd written a manuscript called The Flip Side of Glory, and tried to get Jeff to write it for 8 years, and it was just too emotional for him. And the next thing I know, HBO was calling, and I went back and rewrote the whole book, and they both kind of came out at the same time that in January 2008. And the next thing I know, from the congressional hearings to when the HBO Real Sports special came out, was there was all these other families that were going through hell like we had, and we had nobody to turn to. We had nobody to talk to. We all thought we were the only ones going through it. And I think the one thing that all of us who love our man had to deal with was the fact that behind closed doors, when the shoulder pads and the helmets came off and the family unit was lost in transition, the only thing that our man had at that point was when he walked out that front door. And so we became enablers, we became protectors of our husband, because in all honesty, that's all he had. That's all the integrity that he had, was when he walked out the front door. But behind closed doors, the house was a disaster, you know, emotionally and physically.
It sounds...
That's the stuff people just don't understand, is that what Brandi's just described, the game of football, the nature of the game of football, helped to create all of those issues in their lives.
And being left out and feeling like if you called the NFL benefits that you were looking for a handout. And I fought 16 years to get my husband disability when he had no more fight. He physically, you know, basically said, hey, F them, because they're never going to do anything. And I said, look, here's the deal. You earned every penny of it, first and foremost. Second of all, I'm going to fight for the future of our family, because we were wanting to start a family. We were wanting to move on, and that's what happened. And so we, you know, over the years, we ended up finally getting his disability pension in 1998. In 93 collective bargaining, they came out with a new category called degenerative disc, and I reapplied, and that took another 3 years of sending him to doctors all over the country, because the one thing they don't want you to do is to go consistently and see the same neutral NFL physician. They you know, as my friend Brent Boyd said at the congressional hearings, delay, deny, and hope you die. And that's what we're dealing with right now, even with the concussion settlement going on. Our poor guys, you know, we're all still fighting with the NFL on all of those things. Most people think, oh, the settlement happened, it came and it went, and it's all done. It's far from being done.
I think to kind of piggyback off of that, first of all, I've never played a down in the NFL. I've never played a down in professional football. The closest I've ever had was flag. So I have no clue what anybody deals with. And of course, for people that don't know, this is just one instance. I mean, you have to look at this in more of a global light and say, this isn't the only family that's dealing with this. They're not the only one dealing with hundreds and double-digit thousands of dollars, family per family per family, and there are hundreds of them. So for anybody to make light of the fact, and of course we're going to go into this $1 billion settlement, that just seems to kind of resonate with me, and I want to expand on in just a moment. But when we're talking about what's going on right now, this is just one example. And
yeah,
I think that when you look at Jeff's case, I think it's relatively indicative. It would be safe to say that every single family, at least in the public eye, are happy and they're joyous and everything is well, and you know, everything kind of falls into place. But the reality is that people that are suffering with either CTE or Parkinson's or advanced Alzheimer's or anything else, whether they played the game of football or not, medical conditions are medical conditions. And if you put yourself on the line, if you've laid yourself on the line, and we could probably use military personnel as well, they've laid themselves on the line. They too are fighting for money to help them get to some type of normalcy when we're talking about life, the quality of life. A more perfect example of that, for me to elaborate a little bit more, then we'll go into this $1 billion settlement conversation, is that Ryan Shazier of the Steelers, and Chukky, you could probably relate to this because you've probably seen it happen. I seen that hit on Ryan that Ryan Shazier had laid down, had actually given. Unfortunately, it didn't work to his advantage in the fact alone that he had received temporary paralysis on the field. Now, he's able to walk now, and that's great news, and he does require some assistance in order to walk, but I think the bigger picture is, and all of this is, what quality of life would he have had he have not been able to stand up? He was bound to a wheelchair for the remainder of his life. Now, yeah, there are news and good feel stories out there about other guys like Ryan Shazier who are getting better and they're taking time. They're doing their therapy and their due diligence and things of that nature. And, of course, more so recently, there have been news about Ryan Shazier and the fact that he'll be playing a role with the Steelers to some magnitude this upcoming season. But what money will he have otherwise? I mean, if he never played another down in the NFL and the Steelers did not give him an opportunity to be a part of the system whatsoever and that money ran out, what quality of life will he have?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is the answer to that question is simple by looking at other examples of people who aren't Ryan Shazier. People like Jeff Winans, people out there who they maybe it didn't happen as acutely as his did, where he hit the guy, we could see the effects of his injury right away. So it's easy for people to gravitate towards that and say, okay, we see the danger. But what about the guy who plays for 8-9 years, never has an injury like Ryan Shazier, yet ends up in the same situation as somebody like Brandi's husband?
And the financial burden that goes on, people have no idea what goes on behind those closed doors with just the financial burden. We had no medical when Jeff left. Now we've pushed and gotten 5 years medical. I mean, we've made a lot of progress, and the NFL has the Player Care Foundation, and we've got the Players Association has the Trust in the Locker Room that they started in 2013, and they're trying to re-educate. But the support side for the family unit is where I really got involved in, because if you have never played sports yourself, I was blessed that I was an athlete, but if you have never played sports and never suffered injuries or never knew what it took for that discipline, if Jeff my husband played 7 years in the pros and he played 18 years of football, there was a lot of things that happened to make that, like what Chukky said earlier, to get to that 1.6% of the elite athlete of the world. But when your man gets injured, they need time to grieve. They need to go into their man cave because their identity has been stolen overnight and given to somebody else. And it's been like a death in the family. And if the family unit can't understand that, because they've never had to experience it, the same thing with a military family. I was raised by the Marine Corps book with my dad. If you've never experienced it, you need to be educated. You need to understand the mindset of that athlete from the family's perspective. And as they may start to have not only physical injuries, but neurocognitive things that are starting to show up down the road, you need to understand that this is a possibility and this is what could happen. And when these signs and symptoms are happening, you need to know what to do, just like getting the family unit to understand how to read benefit books and things like that, because majority of these players, they have so much pride that, they'd rather not do anything than do something because the pride is so high of feeling like they're going to ask for a handout.
The NFL is just taking advantage of their sheer enormous size, and that they can do what they want to do without necessarily doing what they said they were going to do. And that is to take care of players and their families, players such as myself and families such as Brandi's family. The NFL's not doing that, yet they're leading the public to believe that they are. And to me, the implications of that spread far beyond us, and it spreads far beyond the NFL. It's these type of cover-ups, these type of lies. If you're withholding the entire truth, that's a lie. And they come out and say that they're going to do a concussion settlement with these former players, but then make it damn near impossible to really receive that assistance that you need for all of the reasons that Brandi's outlined already, and the type of financial burden that most Americans will never understand, never should they have to. But if they say they're going to take care of the families and they're going to take care of the players after the fact, I think it's a question of integrity. And how can we as Americans believe in this corporation that's such a big part of our culture? How can we believe that they're telling the truth about the head injuries and the real effects that come from playing football, not just at the NFL level, but at every level, when they're the leaders in the sport, and they're the ones who have the research, they have the information, and have withheld it. Now you have all these players. There's 20,000 people in the class in the settlement. There's 20,000 people where they're going to owe between $25,000 and $5 million apiece. So that's not a little bit of money, but in the way that those numbers came about with those that were involved in negotiating it, those numbers are what they are for a reason, because depending on the person's situation, they need that amount of money to take care of it. Yet the NFL is going out of their way, not paying people, and making the process so difficult that a lot of players will give up and will literally just go somewhere and die. And I think that that's what the NFL is hoping for, so that they can continue to lie to the public and keep the charade going the way it's been going. All the while, with every hit, people's kids are signing up for a death sentence.
This isn't just about the NFL. You pointed out very well, Chukky, in the sense that this is about football in general. There's been some, they're now oversized helmet. I remember Ryan Clark had to wear an oversized helmet and extra pads because he received a concussion, and he came back too soon, regardless of whether or not the helmet was cushioned enough or there was enough inside of it to prevent any type of hits. And of course, he may as well have been wearing a non-contact jersey, because he didn't basically do anything out there. So with that, when you talk about this $1 billion settlement, which is a perfect segue, Chukky, right now the NFL has paid very little. And when I say very little, they've paid basically pennies on the dollar to each, in some manner, not all, but the majority of people who have basically done everything short of sitting out in front of the corporate office, banging on the door, something.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they haven't been given enough. NFL players have not been given enough. Their families have not been given enough. And I think it's time for the NFL to take ownership. Now, if I'm going to take a class action lawsuit from a civil standpoint, not from a business standpoint, from a civil standpoint, and a corporation like the NFL, I'll just use them as an example and say, you know what, this is something. So we're going to say, okay, you know what, this is going to be $1 billion, and we'll pay you ... Okay, but the biggest, those dots can be interpreted as, when you get it is when we give it. And right now, because they admitted to it by saying, you know what, we're going to settle this $1 billion and we're going to call it a day. But because they haven't paid, because there's been no outpouring of monies to family like Brandi Winans' family, for whom her husband sacrificed himself playing on the gridiron, by which the NFL has ultimately created this big, monstrous entertainment machine. And I'd like to use the WWE or even the UFC as an example, in the sense that they're both gigantic machines, and they're massive, and they own every day of the week, including Sunday. I think that they owe more than just Sunday to Sunday for all those families and players that have put themselves out there for the entertainment value, because the value is not the fact that they played on an NFL field. The value is that they worked so hard. They worked frivolously. They worked at a frantic pace in order to get to play a game that they loved. And now, because they put themselves in a situation to do that, and they exit from an injury standpoint that changes their life, their dynamics, their family life, and their dynamic forever, aren't they owed something? Instead of just saying, we're going to pay you $1 billion and divvy out 2 cents on every dollar?
But they keep saying $1 billion.
It doesn't happen that way. I'll tell you a little bit of our story, what we're going through right now, very briefly. Jeff was diagnosed with CTE when he was one of the first autopsies that Dr. McKee had done back in 2013. He passed away at the end of 2012. We went through all the application. I have a great attorney. I love them. We went through all the process. We got to the medical review board. We passed the medical review board with 5 neurologists, and they accepted Dr. McKee's diagnosis and her verbiage before her diagnosis, so that Jeff had CTE. Back then, she hadn't even broke it out into stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the terminology changes over the period as the technology comes in, and the new equipment, they're able to detect more, like they're working on trying to detect it now while you're alive. So we went to the NFL for final review and payment. They had 30 days for final review. On the 30th day, they appealed our monetary award, saying that they didn't like the way that Dr. McKee wrote the report, and therefore they're denying payment. So now we had to reappeal. We had to go back to Dr. McKee to get a new report, of which now her new report stated that my husband was in stage 3 CTE. There's only 4 stages. Right now, the NFL came back and said that our report, Chris Seeger, the co-lead counsel, came out and supported our claim for 5 pages, almost 6 pages, and the NFL basically said his report was meritless, that it was a bunch of crap. So now we're at the special masters, and we hopefully will know one way or the other the end of February. Also, it doesn't matter how many credited seasons you played. If you got injured during some of those credited seasons and it wasn't a concussion or head injury, they deduct those seasons from you. So Jeff also had 2 seasons deducted of his credited seasons. About $200,000 taken off.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. Is the NFL's playing these kind of games? When you look at Jeff Winans' situation, this is a clear-cut case of somebody who played football for the NFL, died with CTE. It's been proven by Dr. Ann McKee, the number 1 CTE researcher out there, and who studies brains in Boston. And the NFL is saying that their case is meritless. That's to me is a very powerful classification. When you look at the scientific evidence that here's a man who had 3rd-degree CTE, played the NFL for 7-8 years, and his wife's here to corroborate all of the issues that the CTE create for their family, and the NFL still playing games with their money. And this is what I'm talking about. They have no intention of paying these claims. They put out the $1 billion number so that people believe that that's a number that the court has given out. There is no cap to this. There's over 20,000 players that are part of this settlement. And the NFL, basically, for every qualifying diagnosis, they're supposed to pay a certain amount of money. But as you can see, like Brandi said, if you get hurt and you go on injured reserve one of those years you were playing and it had nothing to do with concussion, well, we're not going to pay you for that. And they're finding any way they can take money away from these players that they've already settled with and admitted that football has caused a loss of value in their quality of life. So what's the problem?
The NFL will come back and they say, oh, well, we've awarded. Now, here's the word. We've awarded $245 million in claims. We've awarded that. And then I came back the other day to another friend of mine because I was looking at the stats. Okay, but how much of that has been paid? How much of it has actually been paid? And it's been, like 5%, 10%. Only 4 dementia cases have been paid. My girlfriend, Tom McHale's wife, she was paid. Tom passed away with CTE at age 45. And she was paid right away, as was the Turner Foundation. And, of course, that was their big boost to say, see, we're paying claims.
Yeah, again, it's part of the ruse to fool the public that we're paying these claims when the majority of us are going through these hoops that the NFL keeps putting in your way just to prove something that has already been proven beyond a scientific doubt. There's no reason that Brandi should be jumping through these hoops. There's no reason that 1,650 dementia claims former NFL players and only 4 in the last year have been paid. 4, which means 1,646 players who have qualifying diagnoses of dementia are out there just sitting on their hands waiting, and the NFL is just hoping that we'll just die and go away. But that's not going to happen because they have to take responsibility. There is a day of reckoning that's going to come for the NFL, and they have to take responsibility for the damage that this game caused. And they are the leaders of the sport of football on this planet.
They are.
When it comes to this, there's no one else to point at except the National Football League.
And I love the game of football. I'm chapter engagement coordinator for our NFL alumni here. The beauty that I try to stress with the alumni people go, why are you involved with the alumni? And I go, because the alumni has nothing to do with the NFL. We actually are caring for kids and taking care of our own. So, we pay for their shield.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, we don't know how long the shield will last because now we have the new Pro Legends shield, getting that side by side in case our other shield goes away. We have to pay for that, but we have nothing to do with the NFL. If we did, I would not be a part of the NFL alumni.
Yep. And then there's a lot more people involved in making this NFL show that we put on year after year in the fall. There's a lot of us that make it happen. It's not just Roger Goodell and company. And that's why groups such as the NFL alumni are so important. Bottom line is, it's kind of us versus them right now because the NFL is withholding people's money, and people are not trying to get rich on this. There's guys out there that have ALS from playing football. There's guys out there that have Alzheimer's from playing football. There's guys out there who have died from these head injuries that they suffered playing football. And the NFL is treating them as if what they went through and what they're going through now doesn't matter. I mean, since the settlement has started, the NFL has paid Roger Goodell over $300 million in salary. Yet, of these players who went out there and sacrificed their bodies and their lives, they've only paid a total of $104 million.
Let me throw this out there. He didn't play it down in the NFL.
No. I give Roger Goodell a lot of credit, and I understand he's got a lot on his shoulders and a lot on his plate right now.
Well, he accepted the responsibility, though. I mean, that's his designation. That's his role.
Oh, and I respect it. However, he has inherited this issue because it started with Paul Tagliabue, and he's got a lot of people that he's got to speak for. And it's not just the players. The public sees football as the guys that are out there playing, but there's so many more people and so much more going on that they don't understand. I mean, the guys that you look at on the field every day and your kids look up to, the NFL, once they're done with them, it's like they're a piece of garbage that they just threw away. And they want to just pretend that this head injury crisis that we're dealing with in football isn't real. I mean, they've even gone as far as calling it pack journalism. And they just won't, in their minds, they don't want to pay. Again, there's no cap to the settlement. So they keep putting out this $1 billion number, thinking that, oh, someday when we get to that number, we can say, see, we did it. But you didn't, unless you took care of all of the claims.
Well, and even on the claims, even on our monetary award, then this wasn't in the original settlement. All of a sudden, Chris Seeger went in, and now they're going to take an additional 5% to go into like a little trust fund over there. It's ridiculous that all of a sudden we're also paying for all of that.
Yeah,
you're paying for it.
Again, the NFL is doing everything in their power to take as much money out of the hands of former players and their families that they can, because they have no intention of paying what is owed. They're going to pay a percentage to keep the charade going with the public that, yeah, you see, we're taking care of people. Meanwhile, people such as myself, people such as Brandi, have to sit here on our hands and just hope that they have enough mercy to show us and give us something, when the reality is this is money they agreed to pay and this is money that they owe. And in the meantime, people just keep watching the Super Bowl and buying the jerseys and going to the games because that's what the NFL cares about. They don't care about the former players. And if they did, well, then I anticipate that they'll be paying us soon. When I say soon, I mean soon. Like, to me, this is something that's been going on for a long time. This isn't new. You don't need years and years and years to figure out that Jeff Winans suffered from CTE and that he played in the NFL, the same as all the other people who were found to have CTE played in the NFL. That's the one common denominator between all these people. So
and the other big conception, Chukky, is the fact that, how much you get in your pension for your credited seasons. Now it's a lot different, and we fought really, really hard in the 2011 collective bargaining and the other collective bargainings a few years before that to try to bring the credited season dollar amount up. But, then you're either you can, back then you could take 25%. Well, my husband was only making $80,000 a year. He and twos as a lineman, and Peyton was the highest player at $750. Wayne Hawkins, who was one of the original Oakland Raiders, played 11 years with the Raiders. His pension was $206 a month.
11 years in the NFL, $206 a month.
Are awful. They brought the legends, they added the legends pension in, but it was still minute money compared to what the players are getting today and so forth. And then, you can't get your pension until you're 55 unless you are physically disabled, because, on all the neutral physician reports we had prior to understanding about all the neurocognitive, which is why my mouth dropped in 2007, because it was always about your body parts. It was never about how much are you disabled the neuro was never talked about, even though Jeff would complain about these severe headaches and all the, he had multiple surgeries just from football, like a lot of players do as they age. And, it's crazy.
I think what really needs to be put into perspective here, and just for reiteration purposes, for those that are actually listening, we're live on Facebook. This is Rudy Reyes, joined by Chukky and Okobi, and of course, Brandi Winans, and we're talking about concussions, football, how they're obviously all related. And this isn't something new. This isn't something that people need not to turn their head away from. This is not a popular subject. This is not something that's going to get a ton of ratings. But what it does do, and ultimately the point of this conversation and the bottom line is that if these guys are playing in a league that they have dedicated themselves to get into. This isn't a league for everyone. Not everybody can get in. My guest, Chukky Okobi, certainly fought his way to get there. Didn't know if he was going to start. Ended up playing. Spent a lot of time in the NFL. And now, just like all these other guys, just like all these other players, whether it be Hall of Famers or not Hall of Famers, are fighting to do the very same thing. And that is to be paid for medical expenses, if absolutely nothing else. It's really obvious to see here that you were talking, Chukky, in regards to getting paid a lot sooner and later. I don't know that will happen. The hopes, the lucky rabbit's foot, the finger cross, everything else under the sun would suggest that would be the case. What type of rebuttal, you explicitly speaking, have faced in relation to getting these medical expenses that you've incurred paid back?
Well, I mean, the big thing is, what the NFL's doing in order to prevent themselves from having to pay people. And in my case, once it got to a certain point, they decided to stop the processing and do an audit that they needed to speak to every doctor I saw in the last 5 or 10 years. I gave the information back within 24 hours. That was about 4 or 5 months ago. And as far as I know, they still haven't contacted any doctors. What it is a stall tactic to delay this particular case inevitably. I'm not the only player that's dealing with that. But it's just another example. It's another example of how they can just continue to stall and make this process so difficult. One of the big things is a lot of these players do not have legal representation. So we're dealing with a class action lawsuit here. These claims administrators in the NFL's attorneys, they're used to dealing with these types of situations. This is the type of law that they practice. Now, as a football player, I've never studied law a day in my life. So when they start making things complex in making you have to jump through all these different hoops in order just to get to the next step in the process, a lot of players will quit out of frustration, and the NFL is counting on it. So then they don't have to pay. These are the games the NFL is playing right now. So whether it's an appeal of somebody who's clearly suffered from playing football, or a delay tactic to just stretch this out into infinity, like they're doing with me and a lot of other people, the NFL is trying to continue to let the people think they care, when in reality, if you knew the truth, you would see the NFL is trying to fool you into believing this sport is safe.
There's a gentleman that I had on the show before, Ortiz. He has a book out about his life, and of course he has friends who'd play for the Rams, Oilers, and Titans. I'm just kind of going verbatim because we're Facebook Live, so anybody can chime in here. If you're on Twitter, I'm on Periscope as well. Chime in, ask your questions, put it out there. Let me know what your thoughts are. But he had friends that played for the Rams, Oilers, and Titans with major issues, and now these gentlemen continue to have these issues, and of course nothing getting done. Any individual efforts that they have done, and I know, Brandi, we were talking about how you're trying to head a system to revamp what's currently, I guess, for lack of a better term, has not been done, and what you're trying to accomplish in the sense of not only having your husband's memory offered by those in the upper echelon of the NFL, but what have you been doing more so recently as a part of your foundation in order to help get a resolution to this?
It's been an amazing ride. After my book came out, The Flip Side of Glory, I'm writing a sequel now called Unbreakable Strength, because I want to come back and show where the original book left off, the positive and the negative, and how Jeff and I got back together, because that was the key. When all of a sudden I started getting emails after the HBO and after my book came out, the HBO interview I did with Bryant Gumbel's Real Sports, I had no idea, other than when I was at the congressional hearings, how many other families had been going through what we had. And I think I mentioned earlier, that's when we started putting together some support groups. We have some very private NFL wives groups on Facebook, but I work with one-on-one or with families, either via phone, Skype, or in person. Mostly I've been doing phone and Skype because all of us are across the country someplace, and the venting that we're able to do on our Facebook things as well has also implemented me through getting involved with Sisters in Sports and some other organizations. So when somebody really needs somebody to talk to, I'm certified in behavioral assessments. I'm certified in communications and psychology was my major. But the support that I'm able to give just by letting someone talk, to listen. They've had nobody to talk to. They've had nobody to share things with because of what I talked about earlier, not wanting to bash your man next door. Wanting your man to still have that integrity and pride when they walk out that front door. And so even when I've done speaking engagements, the women you'll see them if they're sitting with their husbands, they'll be quiet until the husband can allow that woman to speak and know that it's not about bashing somebody. It's about understanding what his mindset is going through. And I've been so rewarded, I can't tell you, and I have heard some of the most horrific stories from family members, and guys who are living in the woods, guys who can't deal with anything. They live in a bedroom. They won't come out. There's more and more stories like this coming out, and my heart aches. And then it's trying to help the family unit deal with it and get the players sometimes to a point where they will put that wall down. Mine didn't put his wall down till 2010 because of that pride issue of not knowing something's wrong, but not going there because it's easier not to until you just. If you're losing your family, you're filing bankruptcy, you're losing everything, and you're losing your mind at the same time because it's a degenerative disease. The family unit needs to understand all of this, the possibility of a neurocognitive problem, and I could talk all day about it. But all my clients that I deal with, I do 99% pro bono because I know what it was like when I didn't have anybody.
Yeah, and this is what's going on in the NFL is just letting people suffer or die, and instead of paying the money that they already agreed to pay, and that I think is one of the big issues currently. I think with football and trying to make it safer, that's a discussion that's going to go on for a long time. I think technology is not something that you can rush. Especially if you really want the game to be safe, it's not going to happen overnight. So in the meantime, I think it's important that the NFL does what they said they were going to do, take care of players and families, and so that we can continue to move this thing forward.
I talked to a wife or a girlfriend who, I really am pushing the medical marijuana for our players. I with my own husband and how much it helped. But, when you have a major neurocognitive problem, you're sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night. You're literally losing your mind, so the brain is racing. So you're turning to prescription drugs or illegal drugs, or you're turning to alcohol to calm yourself down. Yes. And as your neurocognitive problem progresses, my husband had anger management, verbal abuse, put holes in all kinds of things that started escalating where we separated because I had no idea that there could be something else happening in his brain until I saw Chris Nowinski on Bryant Gumbel. And that's why I have dedicated the rest of my life to work with families and players to help them. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it has nothing to do with a neurocognitive problem, but you have to find out. You've got to get some testing done. And now our testing today, the screen test and the PET scans and all the different things that are available but it costs money for those things. The NFL's doing some, free screenings and things like that. But when you want to go deeper, Boston University is working with collegiate, pros, and people who have never played sports in a certain age range. If you've played at least 3 years in the pros, they'll take you up there. They've got 4 different locations now. They'll take you up there at their expense. They will run every test that they have possibly going on at that time up there to understand what may be happening with your brain. If you've played at least 3 years collegiate and you never went to the pros, they have another program for that. And again, if you've never played sports, they have another program. So, those are things that the NFL doesn't do, but Boston U does. I'm on Family Advisory's Concussion Legacy Foundation, and these are the things. We just had another quarterly call 2 days ago to talk about Team Up Until 14. So there is other ways to get help, and when I'm talking with these women and helping them to reach out to some of these other organizations or universities or the Cleveland Center that has these things available, the more that you can help somebody, the better that you can help the family unit, and that's really the key. The kids suffer. My son suffered. He suffered horrifically and went through such guilt after his dad died, not realizing that his dad had a neurocognitive problem.
Yeah.
I think that when you're talking about what can be done, what should be done, what has to be done, what must be done, basically entails a variety of tie-ins, meaning that if the NFL is going to send this $1 billion conversation, then that should be the case and to pay out. But you can't have a cap on that. And me and you have talked about that at length, Chukky. You can't have a cap on it. It's got to be capless because $1 billion is a little dot, a little blip on the radar. It's not going to essentially solve all the upcoming issues from players who are eventually going to retire from the NFL. And obviously you have to think about the new talent that's entering the NFL year after year after year after year. So take care of those that have helped make your brand what it is, because that's the business aspect of it that's not being looked at. That's a personal aspect that's not being looked at, and that's not the reality aspect of that. It's not being looked at as well. When you tie all of those together, pay what you owe. Pay what's due. You're a business person, you know that you have to pay taxes. The NFL doesn't. Reasonably pay your commissioner. Well, they don't. Pay off those debtors. Pay off those people who have helped make you the largest entity on the planet for professional football. Take care of them, because eventually they'll have nothing but nice things to say about you and for you and by you and with you to make you a credible entity. If mothers out there, and I hope you're listening, if those mothers out there are really aware of the football story and how kids end up turning into men who ultimately can't take care of themselves, who have to have others rely on them. They don't remember their first name. They don't remember their grandchildren. They don't remember their wife's name. You really have to look at this as a reality check. And the reality check is that these people should be getting a check. That's the true reality check. So, when you look at this, when you really wrap this all up, and of course we could probably go on a whole nother hour talking about this, but again, the reality is that everybody needs to be educated. People need to be educated. I can't speak on that enough. If you want to know what CTE is, you can go on your computer, you can find out, you can look at all the symptoms, you can contact Brandi Winans. She knows all about that. She's been heading this for a long time. She's extremely informed. She does pro bono work. And again, I think if people are more informed, families are more informed, kids are more informed, the mothers are more informed, the husbands, the young men, everybody needs to be more informed. And I think that you can probably curtail and or make the advancements in technology from an NFL standpoint to make the game safer for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at with it. I think that, there's so many things that need to happen right now, a lot of which Brandi and all the things that she's done, have already put those things in motion. I think the most pressing issue right now is the NFL just taking care of their guys that have come before and establish that so that people know, people that are playing in the NFL right now, people that are going to play in the NFL at some point in the near future, have peace of mind that the NFL will maintain their integrity and do what they say they're going to do, and they are going to take care of us. And by paying the former players, that sends a message not just to the football players, but it sends a message to all of America that the NFL is a brand to be trusted. And to me, that's all I could hope for the NFL. But it's hard to really trust in that brand when they seem to be going out of their way to avoid taking responsibility.
And I agree with you, Chukky. And, let me just say, I love football. I love the game of football. I love hockey. I love all sports. I've lived and breathed football my whole life, way before I ever met Jeff, because I love the game. And, we just want to make the game better, but education, and at the same time, keep it as a great American sport.
Yep. I mean, and because of their size, because of their influence on American culture, the integrity of the people that run that business, not just the players, the integrity of Roger Goodell and all of the people that work within that front office and all the different aspects of football, the safeness, the taking care of the players and their families, and the responsibility to the public as a whole. I think that unless they come out and pay all the people that have been hurt by this game, that are part of this class action, that they're going to, in the end, prove themselves to be liars and not trustworthy. And that, to me, would be tragic.
Yeah,
I think what's more tragic than anything else is that the lack of admittance that there's something wrong, that there's an issue, that it's not being taken care of, that people are suffering on a long-term basis that have yet to receive anything relative to help them live a quality of life. And Roger Goodell heads all of this. He lives a quality of life that nobody else does. So, and you've never played it down in the NFL. So why would you let anybody else down who has paid the price playing in the sport that they have fought for, that they love? And I guarantee, and I've spoken to so many Hall of Famers, it's not even funny. And eventually get Jerry Rice on the show. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well when I get him on. But when I look at players, I've spoken enough of them. You and I had spoken originally, Chukky, and it's just grown since then. But I understand these guys. I understand the mindset. I understand what they do. I understand how they do it and the reasons why they do it. And there's a burning passion that burns inside of them. And when they exhibit it on the field for an entertainment value, that value should be reciprocated and sent right back to them. Whether they're playing in the NFL, whether they decide to retire from the NFL, that should be paid back tenfold.
Yeah. And so that's what we're working towards. That's what I'm working towards, is to try to get people paid that are owed their money. And the NFL, obviously, a lot of media outlets don't cover this settlement issue unless it's something in terms of the NFL trying to make people believe they're doing something positive. Then people will pick it up. But it's important shows like this do have enough courage to talk about these things in the way that we're talking about them today. And I anticipate that the NFL...
Chukky, I really applaud you for being here as another former player, to be another voice. We need it. We desperately need it, more of them as well.
I definitely agree. I concur with that, Chukky, because you could have easily curled up in a little ball like lots of other players and be afraid to do anything or say anything about it. But it's not your livelihood only that you're speaking on behalf of. It's everybody else.
It's anybody that's fighting the same struggle that Brandi's fighting. Is fighting the same struggle that I'm fighting now. The same struggle as the Webster family with Mike Webster and countless other football players. And what this game that we dedicated our lives to has done to our quality of life in the present and going forward. And it has now for a lot of us in the past. If you go back to the 90s, 2000s, and in the last 10 years, all the way up to the point where we're at now. And it's an issue that affects baby boys that don't even know what a football is right now, all the way up to men that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and all the women that support them as their sons and that support them as their husbands, and the women that support them as daughters. In essence, it affects everyone. If they don't pay these people, sending a message to the world that they don't care, that they're denying these problems, even though it's very real to those of us that are living it. And all they have to do is just do what they said they would do, instead of playing games and delaying things and making it last forever, hoping that the player just goes away and dies. Because that is the opposite of the image that the NFL would like to portray to the public. Not only that, it's the opposite of the brand that I experienced as a child growing up, because that's not the message that I got, and it's not the message I got as a player either. But at this point, they're showing a complete lack of integrity by lying to the public about the reality of what's going on with the settlement, which in turn is piggybacking off of the lie that they're telling as it concerns the head injuries. And why should we believe the NFL about anything? Why should we believe them when they say it's safe? When they lied about taking care of the guys that they hurt? Why should we believe them? And to me, I want them to give me a reason to believe. That's what I want.
You and lots of other
do the
players.
Right thing. Yeah, is do the right thing here. Take care of these guys. Technology, do what you can to make the game playable as is. We continue to change the rules. You're changing the sport. So it's on technology and science. In the meantime, people such as Brandi, myself, and everyone else out there that's advocating for former players, we need to keep continuing to do what we can do. And I think that right now, the way football is, it's a dangerous sport. It's almost a death sentence, guaranteed. But we can fix that. Humans, when I say we, I mean humans, people. We can fix that with all the resources we have here now in 2018. And all these things need to happen. They need to pay the players. They need to fix the game. And I think that that's the mission that we're on. And we'll just continue to fight until everything is fixed.
I think it's a good fight. I think it's a valid fight. It's an honest fight, and it's a fight that will eventually and hopefully, again, with shows like this, will help deter the NFL from further delaying what is obviously owed, what should be given to resolve medical issues, and if nothing else, just pay off the debt that's been incurred from the CTE or any other medical issue that they faced while playing in a sport that in the onset, look, early players didn't get paid millions upon millions of dollars. They have multi-million-dollar contracts. They did. Yeah. They're fortunate to be paid $1,000 a month, maybe even $100 a game back in the early 30s and 40s. So it's not like they got rich off of playing in the NFL. Players are now rich, and they either don't take care of their monies by investing properly, by investing in people that they trust, and keep a very few selected individuals surrounding them in order to disable others from knocking at their door and say, more push, please, with the handouts. So if these players want to live some type of sustainable life to be able to incur any post-career issues like CTE or Alzheimer's or anything else for that matter, to be fiscally responsible with their money. And again, that starts with education. This issue we're talking about now also involves education. I can talk till I'm blue in the face in regards to education, but you have to educate yourself. In order to understand something, anything, tying your shoes, you need to be informed. And unfortunately, a lot of the guys that are exiting the NFL forget how to tie their shoes. That should not be the case, or at least soften the blow. Have them have some type of quality of life.
One of the things that Jeff got upset with me about when I was still fighting was that he was so worried that our fight would take away his pension later on down the road. And I think I hear that from a lot of players and families that if, I don't want to rock the boat because, down the road I may need the money. It's like I'm fighting for my pension down the road as well. And I don't want my pension to go away because, the NFL blackballed me. Or it's a real catch-22 with a lot of players and families being afraid, knowing that they need to do the right thing, but being afraid to do it.
Yep. So let's just hope. Let me not say let's just hope. We got to keep continuing to put the energy into making things change. And I think it's important for the public to understand the impact it has on them, on their brothers, their children, and some people, their fathers. And you need to make the NFL accountable. Do what you said you're going to do. Don't just keep telling us year in and year out, oh, yeah, we're researching it. Right now, we're starting to see more information coming out about the research that is being done and that there are efforts being made. And if they just stick to the settlement, start being honest about the settlement instead of lying to the public every day, just so that you can maintain face with them, it becomes a national problem as to whether we can trust big businesses like this. I mean, by them continuing to deny the link between the head injuries and the quality of life and the people that play it is no different than what Big Tobacco did. With tobacco continuing to deny that smoking caused cancer, well, eventually the day of reckoning comes where they have to admit it, and the NFL is getting close to that day. And the way they can save face is by maintaining their integrity and do what you said you're going to do instead of giving people like Brandi and myself the runaround.
And again, I can't speak for everybody else out there. I can't speak for the former players. I can't speak for those that have passed away, like the great Mike Webster, one of the greatest centers of all time in the NFL, who was found in his own truck, living in it with feces and all types of other anomalies. And I can't speak to what happened and going through the minds of Junior Seau and what happened before he killed himself. And there's nothing that I can speak on their behalf, but needs to be a resolution. It needs to have one. And I think the resolution starts with the information evolution. Everybody needs to be aware of what's going on to make a push to help other people. And this starts with guys just like you, Chukky.
Yeah, Mary Sal Jr.'s sister and I are good friends, and she just started her own CTE foundation. She's getting ready to have her first event. She was going to have it last year, but she broke her ankle really bad, and she had to cancel. But she is having her event coming up. I think it's in March, down in San Diego. And we're really fighting right now for Pam and Garrett Webster to allow them to be a part of the settlement.
Well, the NFL's not even taking care of them, and this is where the whole thing started. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but they can't do anything for his family, and this is where the NFL's integrity comes into question. And they think that right now people have mixed emotions about the NFL. They continue to distract us with stories about players kneeling or deflating footballs or stealing signs or who made a catch, and these are all distractions from the real issue here. The issue is playing football is dangerous. It's such a big part of our American culture. It's such a big part of our American economy that it's the NFL's duty to take care of the people that make this happen. Because those of us that played, we didn't just make it happen for the NFL. We made it happen for America, for all the different cities that we represented and their fan bases, and entertainment for the people. So for the value that we've brought to society via this vehicle of the NFL, it's important that they do what's right so that we as Americans can continue to believe in that shield and continue to believe in the NFL and continue to enjoy the entertainment of watching and playing football.
Well said, Chukky. Well said. Chukky Okobi joins me here on the Rudy Reyes Show with Brandi Winans. Her husband, Jeff Winans, played for multiple years in the NFL. There is a Concussion Legacy Foundation, concussionfoundation.org. So make sure you check that out for lots more information. Brandi has a plethora, not only first-hand knowledge of dealing with CTE and onset and the advancement, but has done nothing but trying to help educate others in order to give them the understanding of what the reality is if they happen to face whatsoever. It's sad to know that nothing's still being done. I'm still going to carry this on forward and post this everywhere, including the RudeDogShow.com. This is a live show. It'll turn into a podcast. I'll have that posted. The video will be posted. It'll be on YouTube. I'll post it on LinkedIn. I'm going to share this everywhere because I think people need to understand that this isn't an isolated issue, that this is an ongoing issue. It's a forever issue. And unless there becomes some type of way to stop the recycling of the problem, passing it on to the next person, and then the buck doesn't stop. It keeps getting passed. And I think it needs to stop. It stops with the NFL. Chukky, I appreciate your time. It's been fantastic. So I want to thank you very much for bringing this not only to the forefront, but I think that when you look back at this with change that's on coming, because I believe change is just a matter of when. I think that once you see the results, that you will be hopefully, and I'll use that term very, very loosely, hopefully be appeased with the outcome.
Yeah, hopefully we will, and we'll continue to keep fighting, and you continue to keep having the courage to talk about these things. And that's unlike a lot of the media out there who are afraid of the big bad wolf, the NFL, and it's going to take journalists such as yourself to have the courage to just report what's happening. It's not as if you're taking sides or out there on a soapbox. You're just telling the people the facts, the information that the media is trusted to give to them. And I'm going to keep delivering it until the NFL changes.
I just want to call it like it is and do what's right for others. This isn't about me. It's about everybody else out there. These are about the families. And we can have a 6-hour show. We can talk about this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that any resolution is going to happen tomorrow. What that does mean is that we're at least trying to make sense out of what's going on right now and why the NFL has not been paid. Why the NFL continues to have deniable possibility in all of this. Instead of just saying, you know what, you're right, we owe the money, let's just pay it off and we'll be involved. And we're going to treat this as a real business model. A real business model. Any business that's out there will pay its employees. There's a pension. County workers get it. People in the military get it. The NFL should be no different. None.
Yep, exactly.
So I thank you both. I thank you both for your time. Brandi, I wish you the absolute best. If there's anything that I can do for you to help in this, to get the word out, because again, this is not a popular conversation. Nobody wants to have this conversation. Nobody on ESPN wants to talk about it. The NFL Network doesn't want to talk about it. ESPN doesn't. Nobody wants to talk about this. This isn't a popular conversation.
They can reach me by Googling Brandi Winans. They can go to my website, Pro Athletes Transition, or they can just go BrandiWinans.com and they'll pick me up. So I welcome anyone who would like to continue to speak as well, or somebody that listened today that went, oh my goodness, she's talking about my story, my life. I need somebody to talk to. I'm here.
Absolutely. And well, that's ultimately how I found you. Other than Chukky introducing me. So I definitely want to thank you for your time, Brandi, and Chukky, yours as well. And whatever I can do to help, I will certainly do my absolute best to make that happen.
All right. Thank you very much.
On today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. This will be posted on the RudeDogShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Chukky, Okobi, Brandi Winans joins me here on the Rude Dog Show. Thank you so much. We will be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This has been a very interesting and very enlightening conversation for a little bit over an hour here on the Rude Dog Show. And I want to personally chime in here. I've spoken to so many NFL athletes, even former NFL athletes, and really haven't had this conversation, this type of conversation. But I think it's about time. I think it needs to be. I think a lot of people need to know exactly what's going on here. And this is a smoke and mirrors. This is real time. This is a real situation. So thank you for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. This podcast will be loaded and blasted every our LinkedIn, theRuddockShow.com. You'll find me on Cap Sports as well. I have a site there talking about upcoming shows and upcoming events. But certainly check it out. It's worth a listen. Thanks for tuning in. This is Rudy Reyes on The Rude Dog Show.